They thought firing Tommy Norris would end the problem. One signature, one meeting, one cold smile from Cammy Miller across a polished conference table in Houston. Just like that, the man who kept the entire West Texas oil machine from tearing itself apart was pushed out the door with a cardboard box and a security escort. No warning, no gratitude, no second chances. Cammy Miller believed she had removed the one obstacle standing between her and total control of MTech. What she didn't understand was that she hadn't removed the obstacle. She had created an enemy. And enemies in the Permian Basin don't disappear. They wait, they watch, and when the time is right, they strike back. Because Tommy Norris didn't leave quietly, he left angry. And now the man who once protected MTech's secrets is about to use every single one of them. This is where the war begins. This is where loyalties break. And this is the moment Cammy Miller realizes the worst mistake of her career was making Tommy Norris her enemy. Because in the oil game, revenge isn't loud, it's calculated. And Tommy Norris just started calculating. The Permian Basin wakes up before the sun. It always has. Out there in the endless stretch of West Texas dirt, the pump jacks never sleep. They bow their heads over and over again, like iron priests praying to the ground, pulling black gold out of rock that's older than history itself. Men build fortunes here. Men lose everything here. And sometimes a man gets pushed too far. Tommy Norris spent half his life in this basin, long before the executives in Houston learned how to say the word Permian in their boardrooms. Tommy was already standing knee-deep in dust and diesel fumes, solving problems that didn't have clean solutions. Blown wells, angry landowners, cartel threats whispered through burner phones in the middle of the night. When things got dangerous, MTech called Tommy. When negotiations turned ugly, MTech sent Tommy. When rigs stopped pumping and millions of dollars were bleeding out by the hour, Tommy was the one who made it start again. He wasn't the CEO, he wasn't the public face, but everyone in West Texas knew the truth. Tommy Norris was the man who actually kept the company alive. Executives upstairs counted profits. Tommy counted risks. He knew which leases had been signed with shaky paperwork. He knew which regulators liked quiet envelopes slid across the table. He knew which rival operators would shake your hand in daylight and sabotage your wells at night. That kind of knowledge doesn't live in spreadsheets. It lives in scars. And Tommy had plenty of those. But time changes companies, and it changes the people running them. 3 years ago, MTech started chasing something bigger than steady profit. They wanted domination. New money came in, new investors with impatient voices and dangerous expectations. And with them came Cammy Miller, young, brilliant, ruthless. She didn't grow up in the oil fields. She grew up in boardrooms, surrounded by analysts and hedge fund managers who believed every problem could be solved with numbers on a screen. Cammy didn't see the Permian Basin the way Tommy did. To her, it wasn't a battlefield. It was a spreadsheet waiting to be optimized. The first time she met Tommy Norris, she studied him the way a surgeon studies a patient before deciding what needs to be cut away. Dust on his boots, wrinkles carved by desert sun. The quiet confidence of a man who has survived more than most people ever will. Tommy knew immediately what kind of person she was. The dangerous kind. Not because she was stupid, because she was too smart for her own safety. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. Cammy talked about expansion, high-risk drilling programs, leveraged acquisitions across the basin. Tommy listened. Then he told her the truth nobody else in the room had the courage to say. The Permian punishes arrogance. Move too fast and rigs explode. Push too hard and partners disappear. Take shortcuts and the ground finds a way to bury you. Cammy didn't argue. She smiled. And that smile told Tommy everything he needed to know. Because Cammy Miller wasn't interested in warnings, she was interested in results. Over the next year, the tension between them grew like pressure building deep underground. Cammy pushed for aggressive expansion. Tommy slowed deals down when they smelled wrong. Cammy signed partnerships with investors whose money came from places nobody could quite trace. Tommy quietly cleaned up the messes those deals created. It became a silent war inside the company. Executives watched, investors waited, and eventually, Cammy made her move. The termination meeting happened on a gray morning in Houston. No drama, no raised voices, just a folder sliding across the table. Inside it were the papers ending Tommy Norris's career with MTech. Cammy didn't hesitate. "You're too cautious for where this company is going." Too cautious? Tommy had stared down armed men on drilling sites in the middle of nowhere. He had negotiated with cartel intermediaries while executives hid behind lawyers. He had saved the company millions more times than anyone could count. And now he was being told he was too cautious? Tommy didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He simply stood up, picked up the folder, and walked out of the room. Cammy watched him leave without blinking. To her, it was just business. Removing outdated leadership, clearing the path for a faster, more aggressive future. What she didn't understand was the scale of what she had just done. Because when Tommy walked out of MTech headquarters that day, he didn't just take his experience with him. He took something far more dangerous. He took every secret the company had ever trusted him with, every weak lease, every hidden partnership, every dirty deal buried deep inside MTech's empire. And for the first time in years, Tommy Norris was no longer obligated to protect any of it. Back in Midland, the sun was setting over the basin when Tommy pulled his truck on a ridge overlooking miles of pump jacks moving slowly in the fading light. The same machines he had spent decades keeping alive, the same industry that had just thrown him away like scrap metal. Most men would have driven away, started fresh somewhere else. But Tommy Norris wasn't most men. He sat there in the quiet for a long time, staring at the machines pulling oil from the ground, thinking, calculating. Because revenge in the oil business doesn't happen overnight. It happens through leases, through contracts, through alliances nobody sees coming until the damage is already done. And somewhere in the darkness of that West Texas evening, Tommy Norris made a decision that would change everything. Cammy Miller thought she had fired a problem. What she actually did was unleash a war. And the first move of that war was already beginning to take shape in Tommy's mind. But Cammy Miller wasn't the only enemy watching him from the shadows of the Permian Basin, because far away, in a quiet Midland backroom thick with cigar smoke, another man had just heard the news about Tommy Norris losing his job. And unlike Cammy Miller, this man wasn't smiling. He was interested, because in the oil game, a dangerous man without a company is a man looking for a new opportunity. And the question now echoing through the darkness of West Texas was simple. Was Tommy Norris about to build something new, or was he about to burn everything down first? And more importantly, who was already waiting to use him for something far more dangerous? West Texas has a way of revealing who people really are. You can hide behind titles in Houston. You can hide behind lawyers in boardrooms. But out in the Permian Basin, the ground doesn't care about your reputation. It only cares about pressure. And pressure eventually breaks everything, except the rare men who learn how to use it. Tommy Norris understood pressure better than most people alive. He had spent decades watching steel pipes hold back thousands of pounds of underground force. He knew exactly what happened when a system looked stable on the outside, but was cracking deep underneath. That's why the day after he was fired, Tommy didn't call a lawyer, he didn't call the press, and he definitely didn't call Cammy Miller. Instead, he drove back to Midland and started making a different kind of call. The kind that doesn't show up on company records. The kind that builds something quietly. Because Tommy knew one truth Cammy Miller had completely underestimated. MTech didn't just run on money. It ran on relationships. And most of those relationships weren't loyal to the company. They were loyal to him. The first call went to Cooper. young, ambitious, still carrying the raw energy of someone who hadn't yet learned how ugly the oil business could get. Cooper had discovered something rare a few months earlier, a set of wells sitting on land most companies had ignored for years. The geological reports said the rock was unpredictable. Investors said the risk was too high, but Cooper drilled anyway. And what came out of that ground was something every oil man dreams about, a deep pocket of black gold that could produce for years. Under normal circumstances, those wells would have been folded directly into MTech's expanding empire. The paperwork had been moving through the system for months. Except something strange happened. The final signatures never appeared. Nobody at MTech noticed the delay. Nobody except Tommy. And now that delay was about to become the most expensive oversight in the company's history. When Cooper answered the phone that night, he expected to hear anger, maybe frustration. What he heard instead was calm, dangerous calm. "You still own those wells?" Tommy asked. A pause. "Yeah," Cooper said slowly. "Why?" Tommy looked out the window at the dark horizon where pump jacks moved like silent machines in the night. "Good," he said, "because we're going to keep them." What happened over the next few weeks didn't make headlines. There were no press releases, no announcements, just quiet movement across the basin. Tommy started buying small leases surrounding Cooper's wells, land parcels that big companies had ignored for years because the profit margins looked too small on paper. But Tommy knew something the spreadsheets didn't. Oil doesn't follow spreadsheets, it follows geology. And sometimes the best reserves sit hidden just outside the places everyone else is looking. He used old contacts, landowners who remembered him from deals made years earlier, roughnecks who trusted his word more than any contract, engineers who had watched him solve impossible problems when rigs were on the verge of collapse. None of them asked many questions. They just said yes. Because in West Texas, reputation travels faster than oil through a pipeline. And Tommy Norris had built a reputation that money couldn't buy. Within 2 months, a quiet operation began forming around Cooper's discovery. A new company, small, focused, invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. CTT. No flashy headquarters, no corporate speeches, just rigs, pipes, and people who actually knew how to make the ground give up its secrets. Cooper became the public face. He handled the meetings, the negotiations, the investors curious about the sudden appearance of a new player in the basin. But behind the scenes, everyone knew the truth. Tommy Norris was the one pulling the strings. He built the operation the way oil companies used to be built decades ago. Not on leverage, not on borrowed money, on loyalty. The field crews weren't treated like disposable labor. They were partners. Every roughneck working those rigs got a share of the profits. Real shares, not promises. And that kind of loyalty spreads fast in a place like the Permian Basin. Soon, experienced crews were asking about CTT. Engineers started quietly leaving bigger companies. Even a few investors began asking the same question in private conversations. How was a brand new operation producing oil faster than companies 10 times its size? The answer was simple. CTT wasn't chasing headlines, it was chasing results. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Houston, Cammy Miller was celebrating. Her aggressive expansion strategy was finally moving forward. New drilling programs, high-risk exploration projects, massive financing deals backed by investors eager to dominate the basin. MTech was moving faster than Tommy had ever allowed. And for a while, it looked like Cammy had been right. Stock prices climbed, news articles praised her bold leadership. Executives who once sided with Tommy suddenly discovered they had always believed in Cammy's vision. Success can be very persuasive. But success in the oil industry often hides problems until it's far too late. The first warning came quietly. One of MTech's largest drilling projects ran into geological instability, the kind of instability Tommy had warned about months earlier. Costs began climbing. Then another well stalled. Then another. Suddenly, the company was burning through money faster than oil was coming out of the ground. Cammy pushed harder, more rigs, more loans, more pressure. But pressure doesn't solve geological problems, it just makes them worse. And while MTech struggled to keep its massive operations running, something strange started happening in the Permian Basin. In the oil business, money moves fast. Millions flow through pipelines of contracts, investments, and handshake deals that stretch across the Permian Basin like invisible spiderwebs. But some money moves differently. Some money waits, quiet, patient, and when it comes from the wrong people, it never really goes away. Tommy Norris knew that better than anyone. Every oil operator in West Texas eventually runs into the same problem. Wells are expensive, rigs cost money, equipment breaks, production slows, investors panic, banks pull back, and when the banks close their doors, desperate men start looking for other places to borrow from. Places where the interest rate isn't written on paper, it's written in fear. Years earlier, when MTech had been hanging by a thread during one of its worst financial crises, Tommy had faced